Hello, everyone. I am going to go over the first assignment. It's under Module 2. It's the Introduction to Graphic Design module. I will be placing the buttons or links to each of the modules here on the home page of Canvas. And I will also be posting an announcement when I have posted the module and the corresponding items inside of the module. Sometimes there will be things that aren't published right away in the module that you won't see them, but I may talk about them in the assignment that I'm talking about, and just to kind of give you a preview of what's coming up with the rest of that particular module. Okay, so again, all of the buttons or the links for the modules will show up in or on the homepage, but you can also access the modules here on the menu on the left-hand side of the Canvas shell. Okay, so by now everybody has completed the introduction for this class. And now we're going to move into the first actual module for the class. So it's the Introduction to Graphic Design, and you can see there are several things that you are going to review, and a quiz and an assignment that you're going to complete for this. So each module will have an overview, usually maybe some vocabulary that you'll need to review. And then from that vocabulary, you will then have a quiz to take from that vocabulary, or a concept that I go over in each of the modules. Okay, so I'm going to start with the overview. So this module, you'll explore the essential building blocks of graphic design, including terms, key terms, principles, and elements. Whether you're new to design or looking to refine your skills, understanding these core concepts is crucial for creating compelling and effective work. From foundational terms that define the language of design to principles like balance, contrast, and hierarchy that guide composition and elements such as color, line, and texture. This module will equip you with the knowledge to approach any design project with confidence. So topics covered: what is graphic design? Definition, history, and the role of graphic design in modern communication. The elements of design, which include line, shape, color, texture, space, form, and typography. And then the principles of design, which include balance, contrast, emphasis, movement, pattern, rhythm, and unity. So you're going to start by reviewing the terms, the principles, the design elements, and then the graphic design questions. And I've provided links to each of those pages on this module. They're linked in the module themselves, but you can also access each of those individual pages from this overview as well. And then once you have reviewed those 4 pages, you're going to take the graphic design quiz. The quiz is not timed, and you have 2 attempts to complete the quiz. Okay. Okay, so this is the some graphic design terms. So I provided a definition and then an example of each of those terms. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to go through a couple of them. So typography is the art and technique of arranging type to make written language legible, readable, and visual appealing. So that's like choosing between serif or sans serif fonts for a magazine layout. Serif fonts are the ones that have little feet on them, little feet that stick out from each of the letters or most of the letters. So an example of a serif font would be Times New Roman. And a sans serif font would be something like Arial, where there's no little feet, no little things hanging out from the edge of the bottom part of the font. And you will be doing an assignment that will deal with typography. So we'll go over a little bit more with typography in that assignment. White space or negative space, that's the area of design left blank or unmarked to let the content breathe. So maybe space around a logo in a brochure that makes it stand out. So this is a concept where you don't want to stuff every single item, every single content on the page. There should be a little bit of space here and there for things to move, have breathing room around them. And that also gives your eye a chance to, like, if you're reading a paragraph on a page, and there's some white space around or negative space around that, it gives your eye a little bit of time to rest until it moves to something else on the page. Contrast is the difference between elements in a design, which helps them stand out. So you may have something that is black and then something that's white, or you may have something that's large and small. So that's a contrast. The example here is using a dark background with light colored text to make the text more readable. Hierarchy is the arrangement of elements to signify importance or lead the viewer's eye through the content in a particular order. And that goes hand in hand with negative space. So your hierarchy is what you want your viewer to see first when they're looking at a design. For example, if you think of a newspaper, the headline is always big and bold at the top, and then maybe you have a subhead, and then you have your body text. Same thing with like a magazine article. Even on a website, you're going to have a headline, a big bold headline, and then you're going to have other things or other elements on the page that are going to be important, but they're maybe not as important as, say, the headline because it's smaller, a different color, whatever it may be. CMYK, that's important. That's the color model used in printing. Stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. The K is for black. And that's, again, printing something on a printing press. Most things are 4-color printed. It's not necessarily something that would come out of your home printer, but some printers do have, inkjet printers do have the 4-color inks in them. So kind of think of that. And then you also have RGB, which is red, green, and blue, which is used for screens. So web graphics, anything displayed on your computer, anything displayed on your TV, phone, or tablets. Vector graphics are anything created in Illustrator. And with the first assignment that we're going to be doing in this module, you're going to be using Illustrator. Raster graphics, those are anything that are made of pixels. So usually things that you work on in Photoshop, those are all made out of pixels. So photos, any artwork or paintings or anything that you do in Photoshop, that's where you're going to find the raster graphics. A bleed, that's the part of the design that extends beyond the edge where the paper will be trimmed, ensuing no unprinted edges. So think of a magazine cover, business cards, anything that has that's printed and trimmed that has no empty space around it. That's what a bleed is. Leading is the vertical space between lines of text, often referred to as line spacing. So if you think of Microsoft Word, when you double space or 1.5 space your research paper, that's the same thing as leading. So it's increasing the lines between lines of text to make it more readable. Sometimes depending on what font you're using, it may need a little bit more space between lines of text because some of the letters go, like the letter J or the letter Q, any of those letters that have descenders. You may need a little bit more space between the lines of text so that you can, distinguish the letters in each line of text. Alignment is the arrangement of elements in relation to each other to create balance and harmony in a design. So you can align things to the left, to the center, or to the right, and then you can do a combination of those alignments in your design, to add contrast or make harmony in your design. A mood board is a visual collection of images, colors, textures, and typography used to convey the style and feeling of a design. So if you're working on, say, a package design project, and your client asks you to come up with a mood board based on their product, and then maybe some graphics or some colors and textures that you may use for any of the printed pieces or the website. So you would gather those inspiration ideas and put them on the mood board, and then present that to the client as your idea of maybe the direction to go with the design for that product or that product packaging design. And then from there, the client can kind of get an idea of, they may not know it at first what they're looking for. So if you create a mood board for them and kind of give them some ideas of, different photos, textures, fonts, color schemes, and then from there you can kind of start building your product packaging design. Okay, so there's 25 terms on here. I just went over a couple of them, so go ahead and read over the rest of them. Okay, this is graphic design principles. So we have balance, so the distribution of visual weight in a design. So that's usually achieved through placement of elements such as colors, shapes, and textures. Balance can be symmetrical or asymmetrical, so evenly balanced or visually balanced, but unevenly distributed on the page. So example, a symmetrical balance would be a wedding invitation where the text and graphics are mirrored on both sides of a central axis, so the middle of the page. Asymmetrical would be like putting one large image on one side and then maybe smaller text elements on the other side. So that would be asymmetrical. Contrast, using opposing elements such as either color, shapes, sizes, or textures to create visual interest or highlight key areas. So maybe putting a black background with white text, or pairing a bold font with a delicate script that can create contrast. So it's anything that's different. So, two different colors, two different sizes, two different textures. If you have two images of textures, you may have a shiny object and then an object or a picture of like maybe concrete or something. So those are contrast in textures. Again, alignment, aligning everything on one side or the other. Everything should have its place on a layout. So by choosing different alignments, you can kind of stagger things on the page and create some hierarchy that way. But it just makes everything a little bit more polished when you look at it. Things shouldn't be placed haphazardly on a page. They should align to other things or align to the edge of the page. Repetition is reusing elements multiple times. So you may use the same font throughout on a document, or you may use the same graphic element throughout the page as a repetition, using the same color. I think I mentioned that color type. But also if you're doing like a brand identity package, you would keep the brand's color and typography the same across all pieces, because you don't want to have this logo created and then you suddenly in the midstream on one of the other documents that you're creating or designs you're creating completely change the font from that logo when you already had that font, you know, on the original logo. So repetition is keeping some things consistent across all pieces, or like I said, repeating a line or a shape or some color or typography. Proximity, placing things together that are related. So on a business card, so the name, title, and contact information should be placed closely together to show their relationship. So you wouldn't put the person's name in the top left corner and then maybe their title in the bottom left corner. So that they wouldn't be the proximity of those two items are too far apart, and you wouldn't maybe put the connection to what each thing is supposed to be. Hierarchy, again, arrangement of elements to signify importance to help guide the viewer's eye through the design in a logical and intentional order. So you always want the viewer's eye to remain on the page or the design. You don't want their eye going off the page and then not coming back on. So if you kind of think of the zigzag pattern, you want the eye to come in at one point and continue to the other side and down and through the design, and constantly moving around and seeing different things. But once you have the viewer's eye leave the design, you probably wouldn't get them back into the design or the flyer, whatever it may be, because they kind of got lost and they're like, well, I don't know where else to go on this. So it's having a roadmap for the viewer on how to get through your design and what's important, and then what's the next most important object or piece of information on the design. Again, empty space, negative space is empty space around design elements to help focus attention. It helps to prevent the design from being cluttered or overwhelmed. Emphasis, making one element stand out over others to draw the attention. So usually using contrast, color, size, or placement. So this example here is highlighting a call to action button on a website by using a bold color set against a neutral background. So it stands out, and that's you're calling attention to that button, that they know that they need to click on that button to do something else. Movement, again, that goes back to hierarchy. How are you going to lead the person's eye through the design? Is it going to be some kind of shape or arrangement of elements? So the example here is a curved line in a magazine ad to help guide the eye from the top through product and then maybe down to the bottom where there's information on how to purchase that item. Rhythm is a repetition of elements at a regular or varied interval to create a sense of movement or pattern. The example here is a website with alternating light and dark sections, creates a rhythm that breaks up the content and makes it more visually engaging. Unity, sense of harmony between all elements in a design, making it feel cohesive. A brochure where the colors and fonts and imagery all share the same tone and style to help unify in the design and convey a strong brand identity. So again, a color, items on the page may be the same color, same tone. And that way, you know, that they're again going back to the concept of proximity. So having those things together based on color, but there's a unity to those elements. Variety, the use of different shapes, colors, textures, and other elements to create visual interest and prevent the design from becoming monotonous. So a poster that uses various font sizes, colors, and images to maintain the viewer's attention. Scale or proportion, the size relationship between different elements in a design. Scale helps emphasize elements and create visual interest. So maybe a large, bold headline with smaller body text. So there is contrast there, and it draws the reader to the most important information. Pattern, repeated use of elements like lines, shapes, or colors, or even a pattern, you know, like an image of fabric or a image of brick. That's considered a pattern as well. Simplicity, keeping a design clean with only the necessary elements to avoid clutter. So again, I mentioned it a few minutes ago. You don't want to clutter up a design by trying to put everything in a design. I run into that at the newspaper when I'm designing ads for real estate agents, when they're trying to sell a house or rent a house. They've provided me with a bunch of text that I will never be able to fit into the design because there's just simply too much based on the size of the ad that they have purchased. So I have to keep it simple for them, you know, an image of an image of what they're trying to sell, the house that they're selling, and a few key details about the house, and most importantly, their contact information. So less is better when it comes to designing stuff to get your point across. And then you also have that call to action that's going to maybe force that person looking at your flyer or whatever it may be to then contact you or get in, you know, try to get more information about your product or your event or whatever may it be you're trying to advertise. Depth, creating the illusion of 3D space in a two-dimensional design using shadows, overlapping elements, or perspective. And then Gestalt principles, the idea that human brain perceives elements as whole rather than as separate parts. The principles include proximity, similarity, continuity, closure, and figuring around. So an example is in a logo, even if a shape is incomplete, the viewer may still perceive its completed closure or series of dots placed in a curve will be seen as a line. Even so there's a little bit of space in between the dots, you still kind of read it as a line. Okay, so those are the graphic design principles. And then these are the graphic design questions. So you're going to review these questions below and then take the quiz. So the quiz is based directly on these questions. So study the questions. You have, I'm not going to go over these questions. You can go over those on your own. But it explains exactly what each term is in there. In each question, there's a term and then explanation underneath it. So all of the questions here are on the quiz. So if you study this, you will be able to get the answers for the quiz from here. Okay. And then I'm going to go over the quiz, the instructions for the quiz. And let me view it this way so you can see. Okay, so you have 25 questions. There's no time limit, and you have 2 attempts on the quiz. Okay. So the goal of this quiz is to test your understanding of key graphic design terms and their definitions. The quiz is based on the graphic design question that I just showed you. The quiz is not timed, and you have 2 attempts to complete the quiz. Read each statement carefully. Take your time to read each statement in the quiz. Each blank corresponds to a specific graphic design term taken from that graphic design question. Think about the definition. Consider the definitions you learned from the graphic design questions. Try to recall the specific term that fits in each statement. Write your answers in the blank space provided. Make sure to spell each term correctly, as accuracy is important. Review your answers. Once you have completed the quiz, take a moment to review your answers. Ensure that you would have filled in the blanks. Okay, and then you take the quiz. And again, like I said, you have 2 attempts, and there's no time limit. And if you have any issues with the quiz, just let me know. And I can go in and figure out what's going on with the quiz. Okay. Okay. And you can see the due date there for the quiz. And again, if you need extra time to complete the quiz, let me know. But it is not a timed quiz, so you have as much time as you need to complete the quiz. Okay. All right, so this concludes this part of the video. I'm going to record another one for the explanation of the poster, and then I'll go over the graphic design video resources as well. Okay, so again, if you have any questions about this first part that I went over, any of the terms, principles, questions, or the quiz, just email me and let me know. And then I will get back to you with those, with your questions. Okay.